They have a combined 12 years in the National Football League. They combined for 65 career sacks, 232 tackles, 1 Pro Bowl selection, and 1 Employee of the Month award.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
It's Train and Grose on the All AZ Podcast Network.
Welcome in episode 76, Train and Grose, B-Train, Bertrand Berry, Mike Grose, and Sean Crespin coming at you today from our remote locations. My fault. I'm in beautiful Laramie, Wyoming, where it's about 30 degrees cooler than what you two are dealing with right now. But guess what? It's nice. It's very, very nice.
Hey, I won't hold it against you, brother. I know that sometimes you just got to get away from the heat and just cool off literally and figuratively. And if that's what it takes to keep your sanity, bro, you do what you got to do, man. Take care of you.
There we go. So I'm gonna go right back to the food story because I got a couple texts, a couple hits on Twitter about my story from a couple weeks ago when I went out to dinner in Las Vegas with our good friend Marco D'Angelo, and I told the waiter I'll have what he's having, and I had a veal, which was delicious, but it conflicted me a little bit. So we roll into Laramie, and we went to a vegan restaurant, and I had vegan meatloaf with mashed potatoes and mushroom gravy. I'm telling you what, fellas, I'm not ready to go all in on vegan, but this was delicious. We're going to be here for a little bit. We're going back, and I'm going to order the same thing again. So I don't know if I've totally redeemed myself with a vegan order, but it was delicious.
Hey, brother, hey, whatever floats your boat, whatever gets the job done, and as long as you're satisfied with it, who cares what anybody else thinks, man? Order your meal again and enjoy every bite of it.
Shout out to Sweet Melissa's in Laramie, Wyoming. If you ever roll through town, give it a shot and tell them that you heard about it on Train and Grose and you want the meatloaf. You'll enjoy it. All right, episode 76. I only have 3 names. One guy I know for sure you didn't play against. I know one guy you didn't play against, B-Train, but he's one of the all-time greats in the NFL, Lou Groza. He played offensive line, but was also he's scoring points and buckets as a kicker. Lou the Toe wore number 6 for the Cleveland Browns back in the day. He played in the 50s and the 60s. But the next 2 I think you might have an opinion on, B-Train. I'm going to start with Steve Hutchinson, a guy that played mainly for the Seahawks. I think he wrapped it up with the Vikings. And you may have, correct me if I'm wrong, you may have crossed paths with him collegiately as well.
Yeah, we crossed paths in Michigan and also obviously in the NFL in the same division when he was in Seattle. That offensive line, that left side with he and Walter Jones, that was an absolute nightmare for defensive linemen like myself. He was a great, great player, Hall of Fame player, and a good guy. Even though he went to Michigan and even though he played for Seattle, which were direct rivals of mine, I have a lot of respect and admiration for Steve Hutchinson. Big Hutch is a class act in my opinion, and I got nothing but respect for him.
And then the other guy I know we've talked about this guy a couple of times, but we got to give him a shout out since we're on episode 76. You played against him cross line at the Rams, Orlando Pace.
Orlando was one of the more difficult tackles that I ever played against. He was a very mobile, very tall, athletic offensive tackle, a guy that could mirror you, and then he'd want to pancake you. So we crossed paths at Ohio State as well as the Rams a number of times, and even in our last years when he was in Chicago with the Bears. A lot of people don't know that. A little known fact, he finished with the Chicago Bears, and so Orlando was definitely a Hall of Fame player. He deserves to be in Canton, and he was the number 1 overall pick in the year that I came out. So there's a lot of connections with me and Orlando Pace, and we go all the way back to 1995, playing in the Big Shoe down in Columbus when he had Eddie blocking for Eddie George, and he was known for those pancakes, man.
Hey, going back to last week, episode 75, we went through our list of players that wore 75. It was a deep list, and we got a lot of nice feedback on the picture you posted for Deacon Jones, but
Hmm.
Keith Millard was upset that we didn't mention him at number 75.
I got to give a shout out to Keith. And, the funny thing about it is, as crazy as Keith was when he was a player with the Vikings, he was a great, great coach. He coached me when I was at the Denver Broncos. And a little known fact, Aaron Donald broke Keith Millard's record for interior lineman sack in a season because he had currently held it for at least almost 24 years at 18 and a half sacks. And Aaron Donald was able to come in and surpass it with 20, which is unbelievable for an interior lineman. But Keith Millard was in the history books for a very long time and had a really productive career while he was in the NFL.
So we'll
shout
mark
out to
this on the podcast. Yeah, and we'll give him that shout out. All right, starting off in the NFL, and typically we probably wouldn't do it this time of year. I mean, obviously we know the NFL is always in the news, and even locally here, there's some things we need to get into. But unfortunately, just a really tragic day for the Baltimore Ravens. Waking up this morning, they announced the death of one of their linebackers, young player by the name of Jalen Ferguson, 26 years of age. By all accounts, reading what's been said about him, bright future in the league, and a kid that was making an impact with a really good defensive team over there. And if that wasn't bad enough, later this afternoon, about 1 o'clock our time in Arizona, the Ravens announced the death of one of their all-time greats and a guy that I think you look and see him after the fact. I love the way they used him on Fox when he was on the sidelines, but Tony Saragusa, Goose, passed away this afternoon at the age of 55. And B-Train, I know in both cases, this is tough news, but a guy like Tony Saragusa, a guy that you consider a peer, a guy that you played against, a guy that you can tell stories about because you watched him play in the National Football League.
Mike, this is indeed a sad day. I didn't know about Tony Saragusa until you guys told me about him. And I'm devastated when I think about Goose and what he meant to the game and what he was as a character, as a guy that really made that broadcast go on Fox. When he would report from the end zone, he'd always be leaning up against the goalpost and giving his 2 cents on what was going on. And a guy that I had the opportunity to meet a couple times, and obviously he was a well-known figure in Baltimore and part of that historic defense back in 2000 when they made that Super Bowl run and beat the Giants pretty handily in that Super Bowl. Just a great personality, a great man. And, I feel that one because guys our age aren't supposed to be checking out this early. And then with Jalen Ferguson, my goodness, 26 years old. I mean, he's a baby. And I think about my kids. Mike, we both have kids that age. And to think that he's gone before he's able to make a mark, that's heartbreaking. And I send condolences out to both families, to the Ferguson family and the Saragusa family, and more importantly, the Baltimore Raven organization, because as you said, Mike, they got hit pretty hard the last 24 hours. And with everything going on currently with the Baltimore Ravens, this is just one more thing. And Mike, anytime you hear about young men passing too soon and players that pass before their time, it always hits home with me, and it just makes me thankful to be able to see another day.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, and with the Ravens, the business of football goes on. I mean, you acknowledge and you understand that, but this is a business like everything else, and so the business goes on with the Ravens. But just a really devastating day for one franchise to have to go through, and the Ravens. Like I said, it doesn't get any worse than that. Keeping it with the NFL and the stories going on within that, Roger Goodell testified in front of Congress today. This is the hearing that Daniel Snyder decided to skip, and he was absolutely roasted by the congressional members who were holding the hearing. But more importantly, if you go back and listen to the testimony that Roger Goodell gave, he wasn't covering for anybody in this case. He was calling, what happened with the Washington team, the Commanders now, unacceptable. This is not what the league stands for. And, sometimes we can point back to other times when commissioners get put on the carpet and they use that, commissioner speak where they're covering for their league, they're covering for their owners. because we know essentially that's what all commissioners in professional sports do. They cover, they act at the behest of the owners. But he did Daniel Snyder no favors at all. And apparently they introduced a photo of Daniel Snyder's yacht somewhere in France. That's where he decided to be instead of testifying in front of Congress. And we go back to the story that we've been following now. You drag the commissioner and by extension the other 31 owners in front of Congress for this type of hearing. Can't go over well with Daniel Snyder's peers.
No, it's not going to go over well. And I think for him, he needed as much positive coverage as he could get, considering everything that's gone on in the last 2 years with the Washington Commanders football organization. And for him to have ducked out and passed the buck in this situation, it's a very weak move. And I thought it was gutless for Daniel Snyder to do this. And yes, there will be fallback. There will be blowback by the rest of the owners. And for Roger Goodell, he's got to be careful. He's taking the chance, Mike, because we know Roger Goodell, his main job is to take those hits for those owners. They pay his salary, and he's paid very handsomely. And for him to go out there and say that against one of the guys that pays his salaries, that's going to be discussed amongst that group, I'm sure. But at the same time, I think they all feel some kind of way about what Daniel Snyder's doing by himself. So you just don't know how this is going to play out. I think time will tell, but this is a very bad look for the Washington Commander football organization. And more importantly, it's a bad look for Daniel Snyder as an individual and as a man.
Yeah, it's hard for him to fall any lower in how people feel about him, but I think he managed to hit another rung lower today. And going back, I 100% would agree with you on the commissioner of the National Football League, but I got to believe he maybe didn't talk to all 31 owners prior to this, but I'm sure he touched base with some of the more influential owners, the Jerry Jones of the world, the Mara family, the Rooneys, whoever, and said, look, here's how this is going to go down today. Yeah, the Crafts. Here's how this is going to go down today. Are we good? You know, so that there was no surprises. I think the worst thing in the world he's going to do is get out there and surprise, to your point, the guys that sign his paycheck. But by the same token, he can't sit idly by and cover for Daniel Snyder. You know, so you put the commissioner in a really difficult position by dipping out, number one, and the actions of this organization for the last number of years.
Yeah, just a bad look all the way around, Mike. And I'm sure we haven't heard the last of this. I'm sure there'll be more said. And I'll be very interested to see exactly what the fallout is, because this cannot be a good look for those 31 other owners. And the last thing that they want is bad publicity as you start to gear up towards the 2022 season.
Absolutely. All right, quarterback watch. No quarterbacks got contracts since the last time we talked. It's June the 22nd, and we're getting into that kind of period where, you know, the people that watch this historically said, hey, look, if it's going to get done, whether we're talking about Baltimore, Arizona, any place, if your quarterback's going to get a new contract, typically it gets done from that July to August timeframe once all the other businesses taken care of. But both these franchises, the Ravens and the Cardinals, their quarterbacks are in the spotlight, and everybody's waiting. Everybody's waiting to see how this plays out.
I think both teams are coming at it from very different positions. I think with the Baltimore Ravens, they really want to get this done. I think Lamar Jackson is the one that is probably holding this up. I think that the Ravens would like to settle this and get him secured and make sure that he's comfortable, because they understand that this whole thing was built around Lamar Jackson, a guy that was the 32nd pick overall in the draft, and he has far exceeded that pick. And for him to still not be concerned, I mean, he just seems so nonchalant about everything. And he showed up to the mandatory minicamp, and he was able to ingratiate himself back into that locker room. I'm sure not very many people looked at him with a side eye, because they know who Lamar Jackson is for them and what he means to that team. So the fact that he did show up, I thought it probably went a long way with those other players. And it's just a matter of time. We know Lamar is going to get his money. What the details are, we won't know until this is finalized. But we know that he's going to be a very rich man in the very near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quickly before we dip off the Cardinals, with Kyler Murray, I think we've covered that one from beginning to end, and now it's just waiting it out to see how this plays. Rodney Hudson's story, though, the thing that's remarkable to me, if you go out and look, like when he missed camp, and it came as a surprise to most everybody who watches the team, there's been no news since then. I mean, people behind the scenes saying, well, they plan him in here, what's going on? But there's been no news. Like, he missed camp because he's thinking about retiring. He missed camp because he wants his deal reworked. He missed camp because he wants a trade. Maybe he wants to retire. There's been nothing. There's been no news in terms of why he missed. And I think that's got to be very, very concerning.
Very concerning, because I think he's one of the more important players on that offensive side. With all respect to Kyler Murray, I look at Rodney Hudson and what he was able to do from the very first game. Go back to the Tennessee game, Mike, and what he was able to do and get them out of some bad calls and really help Kyler Murray out, because he seemed to have had a better grasp of the situation than Kyler at times. And for him to not be there by his own choice, and Coach Kingsbury saying it was not an excused absence, and we're all just kind of twisting in the wind, waiting to hear the next tidbit of information. This is this is the one organization that really didn't need to have more talk like this about their team and about individuals on the roster. Absolutely. But here we are again talking about a player not very happy with the organization and not showing up ready to work.
And not knowing why, or maybe not isn't the right word, not knowing what the preferred resolution is.
Right. But I think he holds a lot of it.
He got himself out of the Raiders, right? He got himself out of the Raiders, right? Said, I want out, and they accommodated him, right? So if that's what he wants, like, does the front office know that? Does he want to retire? Like, he's 33 years old. He's got a new baby. Maybe he's done playing. Whatever it is, just not knowing, I think, is the hard thing when you look at that. All right, real quickly before we get out of here on this one, I promised we'd do this every week, and we should have the breaking news. This just in: Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, still with their respective teams.
Yeah, Mike, and I think until both are actually released by their teams, I think you're going to see this. I think a lot of the league is playing chicken with the Browns and with the San Francisco 49ers, because they want those players, but they want them on their own terms, and they don't want those contracts that come with them at the present time. So until the Browns and the San Francisco 49ers make a move and release them outright to free up that money and free up that contract, I think you're going to see the same thing. Mike, before we get out of here, too, we got to give a shout-out to my man, Rob Gronkowski, University of Arizona alum, retiring for the second time. Everybody thought he was going back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and he was going to run it back with Tom Brady and company, but he had different plans. He said, not so fast, my friend. This time I'm going to walk out with my head held high.
Yeah. And you know what? I think anybody, you follow the Gronk story from his time at Arizona, obviously through the NFL, definitely marches to the beat of his own drummer. And, this was the time. It's time to go. And like you said, he went out on his own terms. And there's something, I'll share it with you. I don't have it in front of me right now when we get to the end. Does Gronk unretire? And they've got odds on that already, whether or not he unretires. And I guess it depends how persuasive TB12 can be with his tight end.
If there's anybody that can make him unretire or make it to where it seems suitable to unretire, there's only one guy only, and that is Tom Brady. And so for Gronk, look, he's played 11 years, a 4-time All-Pro, 4-time Super Bowl champion, considered one of the top 5, easy top 6 tight ends of all time, no doubt about it. There's nothing really else to prove. I think he and Tom Brady have different thoughts about their legacy. And for Rob Gronkowski, think about this, Mike. If he retires officially, he would have played exactly half the career that Tom Brady did.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing with
years
Gronk,
to 22 for Brennan.
The other thing with Gronk, it's very well documented about how smart he's been with his money. Because he's got this persona that he carries out, and he does it very, very well, and he's very consistent with it. But behind the scenes, he's been very, very smart with his money. I forget which financial publication it was, did a whole in-depth feature on him about from day one when he got into the league, how he didn't spend any salary, right? And then the other thing that you look at with Gronk, all the way back to his days at Arizona, he's been a guy, because of the way he plays, that's got a lot of health issues. And at some point, this is it. Maybe, hey, look, it's time to go while we can still go, again, on his own terms.
Mike, this sounds exactly like one Marshawn Lynch. Remember when he retired, a lot of people were saying how good he was with his money and how he didn't spend any of his contract. Anytime you have these eccentric personalities, they always seem to have another side to them where they seem very grounded and they seem very level-headed. So it almost seems as if they're putting on a show. But in reality, they're one of the smartest people in the room. They just don't want you to think that.
They let you see what they want you to see. All right, we'll step aside here. On the other side, we get into the NBA Finals just concluded. You're listening to Train and Gross.
Train and Gross.
Welcome back in. Train and Gross. Follow us on Twitter at Train and Gross. It's just that easy. We sent out a Twitter poll at the conclusion of the NBA Finals. 4 championships in 8 years for the Golden State Warriors. Do we now consider this team to be a dynasty? And I think it's a fair question, and the people that responded to our Twitter poll overwhelmingly said, yeah, this is a dynasty.
Well, Mike, the fact that they've been to 8 finals and or 6 finals, I should say, and to, have that opportunity to be in the same breath with the 90s Bulls, I think it speaks well of the organization. I think with Steph Curry, he's done nothing but elevate his legacy. And for Steve Kerr, a guy that is a consummate professional, you have to start putting him on the same level with a Phil Jackson. Remember, Phil Jackson was a guy that had a lot of championship rings, some as a player, but mostly as a coach. Steve Kerr is almost halfway there. He's got 5 as a player, but now he's got 4 as a coach. And he could be one of those guys that could go down as one of the all-timers because of the fact that he's been able to do it on both sides. He was able to find success and be in the right situation at the right time as a player with 3 different organizations. And then looking at what he's been able to do with the Golden State Warriors. And I was very critical of Steve Kerr as well because I thought it was Mark Jackson's team. But lo and behold, Steve Kerr has really put his stamp on this organization. Yeah. And with his 4th championship ring, there's no doubt that this is his team and has been his team all along.
And just like it's not fair to compare players to say, well, Jordan versus LeBron or whatever, I think the same thing can be said when you're talking about coaches and their legacies. But when you look at Steve Kerr, I think he took equal parts of people that he spent time with. When you look at the influence that Greg Popovich had on him or, other coaches that he played for.
Phil Jackson.
Of course. And you can see that in him. I mean, obviously he's his own man, and I don't want to make light of anything that he's accomplished. But smart people are able to incorporate those relationships and those experiences and help mold where they are, whether it's in business or in professional basketball.
Yeah, I just love the fact that Steve Kerr just seems to always land on his feet. And I think with the conversation about Steph Curry and where his all-time greatness lies, I think he put that to bed with this performance in the finals. What he was able to do is absolutely sensational, Mike. I think a lot of people are jealous of Steph Curry because he's had a charmed life, the son of an NBA player, a brother that's an NBA player, and ever since he's gotten into the NBA, it's been nothing but a meteoric rise to greatness. And a guy that's going down as as the greatest shooter in NBA history just continues to add hardware. And the fact that he's got a Finals MVP, it was the last box for a lot of people to check off. Now there's nothing else you can say. He's one of the greatest, and I think he belongs at the table of the all-time greats, most definitely a top 10.
No, I think that's absolutely true because you heard people discussing his legacy leading up to this, and the conversation always was, yeah, but he doesn't have that Finals MVP, and clearly he got it. Clearly he earned it, and I think that, to your point, cements that legacy. And the other thing, too, is in 2022 terms, he's still relatively young. He's going to keep going for a while. And you look at what they've accomplished here in Golden State. I wouldn't bet against him going forward. And you always look at things and try to factor in, like when you tell the story. Obviously, there's what you see in the game and the trophy presentation, but there's a video that came out afterwards of at the very end of the game where you saw Andre Iguodala ran up to whoever it was for the Celtics that had the ball and grab the ball away from him, not in a bad way, but just grab it. And you saw him running away, and then the cameras, the ABC cameras went away. Well, there was a follow-up video that said he was going through the crowd looking for Steph Curry. And so for a veteran like Andre Iguodala to have that foresight and to think that's what he wanted to do, I think tells the story to the point that we've been talking about. What does the teammates think about Steph Curry and what he means to this team? And to me, that kind of behind-the-scenes thing that you see 3-4 days after the championship really tells the story.
I really believe Steve Kerr will go down as one of the more likable, great players of all time. He's got that baby face. He's a guy that's always smiling. He's got a beautiful family, beautiful wife. There's nothing to really hate on about Steph Curry other than people wish that they were him. They wish that they had his life. Yeah. They wish they had his contracts. They wish they had his financial situation. And so I look at him and he is every man's dream, I think, because he's a guy that's accessible, unlike a Michael Jordan, unlike a LeBron James, where you're talking about larger-than-life figures. Michael Jordan, 6'6", LeBron James, 6'8", 6'9". Most people have no idea what that feels like, but most people can relate to Steph Curry because Steph Curry is not an average man. He's 6'3", he's my height, but he's still a guy that looks more like the average man than he does an absolute immortal. And I think the fact that he's able to look like a mortal and still able to change the game completely the way that he has, I think you have to give it up for him, and you have to put him in a category all his own.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and now you look at it, right? And you look at this Warriors team and say, all right, what's next? And you can't count them out. It's not like you're looking at a team that's that old, or obviously they're going to tweak, they're going to work it around, but this is a team that's going to be there for a couple more years at least.
Mike, think about the talent that they didn't even use. Think about the young guns, the Moody's and the Wisemans, and the it just seems as if they've got so many guys that are teenagers. I mean, they had two teenagers that are now NBA champions, 19 years old, and they're NBA champions, and they're only going to get better, Mike, with more experience and more time. So this system, which Steve Kerr and the rest of the front office of the Golden State Warriors that they put together, this system, it just seems to refuel. And the fact that they've got those young guys in there and they've gotten that experience and they see what it takes, I really believe that the Western Conference needs to be worried because they don't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. And even though a lot of those teams are going to get healthier this coming season, the Denvers, the Clippers, the Pelicans, there's a lot of teams that are going to be on the rise, but it's going to be hard to knock off the champs because they've got that perfect blend of veteran leadership and youth that's got some experience now that's looking to continue everything that's been going on thus far in the last 8 years.
Yeah, and I misspoke a moment ago. 33. I said Steph Curry's 33. Actually, just turned 34, but he's not slowing down. So he'll be around for a while.
Yeah, one of the more well-conditioned athletes that you've seen in a long time, with all the running and getting off screens and movement that he does. It's unbelievable. I get tired just watching him at times.
Well, and the other thing, too, with the Warriors, the last couple of years, because you talk about when you look at the all-time greats, and we talked about this with Kobe, like how many years they said he played in the NBA. But then when you go and rewind it and look at what he did with, international competition, what they did in postseason when he was with the Lakers, they actually had a little bit of a breather for the Warriors the last couple postseasons where, due to injuries and everything that was going on, where they didn't play and put as many miles on, in particular, Steph Curry on those legs particularly. So relatively speaking, maybe he's a young 34 compared to some of the other people we put in his category.
Mike, let me ask you this, and I know this is going to seem blasphemous to a lot of people that are going to listen to this later on, but I got a serious question for you. Who's had a more impressive career, Steph Curry or LeBron James? Because think about this. LeBron James has had to go to 3 different organizations to amass his 4 rings. Yes, he was the leader, and he was the unquestioned leader on all 3 stops. But you think about Steph Curry and what he's been able to do as well. He's got 4 himself, and 3 of those 4, he was able to beat LeBron James head-to-head. So
Yeah.
when you start now, granted, they had Kevin Durant, and everybody always wants to put the asterisk by those 2. But now he's got one before Kevin Durant and one after Kevin Durant, and he never had to switch teams to do it. I look at that, and I think for me, that gives him a little bit of a tick up on LeBron James. Even as great as of a career that as he's had, in my mind, is more impressive what Steph Curry's been able to do as far as staying with one team and reloading this system and staying true to the course than what LeBron has had to do, which is go to different spots, learn how to win, bring it back to Cleveland, then go to LA and come with some other talent as well. It just, to me, what Golden State has done with Steph Curry just seems a little more impressive.
I completely agree with you, because in this day and age where it's easy to have these conversations about let's put a super team together, right? Where Steph has drafted by the Warriors, stayed with the Warriors. He'll never leave the Warriors. And to your point, he's getting the accolades and the championships that LeBron did moving around. Almost makes him kind of a throwback, to the pre-super team eras. And I know that's we're talking maybe 10 years or so. But yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. Cleveland, then Miami, then Los Angeles. And I think, free agency players earn the right to do what they want. So you can't criticize LeBron for doing what his right is. But when you're making that comparison, I completely agree with you. The fair comparison would be if LeBron had stayed in Cleveland all those years and they rebuilt and reloaded around him with players coming and going, and he might have had a Kevin Durant type player stop by Cleveland. Maybe not. I don't know. But he didn't. He chose his path, and I think it's a fair comparison. And for me, I like the way that Steph did. I really do. I agree with you on that.
I'm not saying that Steph is a better player than LeBron James. I just look at how he's gone about his career and how he's stayed true to the team that drafted him, and he's never had to go anywhere to manufacture
100%.
a championship. And we know certain rings carry more weight than others. When you join a team and you join other great players, you get the ring, but you don't necessarily get all the credit for that. And I think for LeBron, when he went to Miami, a lot of people looked at that move a lot like when Kevin Durant chose to go to Golden State.
100% agree. 100% agree. And like I said, that is the NBA 2022. You as a fan, you have to accept that, but you can also appreciate it when you see the exceptions to the rules. And I think that's what we have in Steph Curry. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but more NBA talk on the other side. We got the draft coming up and a lot of trade talk heating up, and trade talk involving the Phoenix Suns that's not necessarily centered around Deandre Ayton. We'll get into that and more coming up on Train and Gross.
Train and Gross.
Welcome back in, Train and Gross. I'm in Laramie, Wyoming today, so that's why we are not at our usual setup at Train Station in beautiful downtown Phoenix. Hey, B-Train, a couple things to get to before we get to NBA draft and trade talk. Number one, I should have mentioned this during the NFL segment, my bad, but let's give a shout out to Brock Purdy. Played at Iowa State, of course, played high school ball here in the Valley, coached by one Dan Minucci. Since he was a wee lad. But he was on the NFL Network today. He was on Fox today as they did Mr. Irrelevant celebrations over in Southern California. Wonderful organization, raises a lot of money and celebrates the last player drafted in the National Football League. That, of course, was Brock Purdy. He signed his contract with the 49ers. And you love when good things happen to good kids. And so we send a shout out to Brock Purdy and a little tip of the cap to his quarterback coach, Dan Minucci.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I believe he went to Perry High School out here in the East Valley.
Correct.
So, yeah. So, big shout out to Brock Purdy. Shout out to Perry Pumas, if you will. And, it's a good day, like you said, when good people are rewarded for their hard work. And Manuch had a hand in that. And of course, he's sitting around somewhere just as proud, talking about keep on, Brock. Keep on, brother.
Keep on. That's right. All right. Also, I should have mentioned earlier, but as we pivot back to NBA talk, this date in NBA history, the Houston Rockets defeated the New York Knicks in Game 7 to win their first championship in franchise history.
Whoop, there it is. Whoop, there it is. That was a Game 7. And if you remember, Starks was so cold in that game. I mean, I can't ever remember a guy being that cold in a game. I mean, I think had he made one of his field goals, I think he missed like 18 or 19 shots. And the fact that it was a Game 7, and I think they look at that and just say, man, if he was able to hit anything, it may have been a different outcome. But hey, if was a fifth, we'd all be drunk. We're champs. I always consider myself a two-Stonian, because the Rockets have won. They won back-to-back, and that was the first one. And, Mike, if you remember, in that series on June 17th, that game that was in Madison Square Garden was interrupted by one Orenthal James Simpson going down the what is it, 405? Yeah. So, that day, there was a lot of things going on that day. I think ESPN did a 30 for 30 on it.
They did.
June 17th, 1994. And it was crazy. But, shout out to my Rockets for getting it done.
Your boy John Starks, 2 of 18 that day. 2 of 18. He did have 8 points, but played 42 minutes and jacked up 18 shots despite only knocking down 2 of them. For those scoring at home, that'd be 11% from the field. Yeesh. 0 for 11 from 3. Dude shot 11 threes.
There it is. Oh, there it was.
Dude shot 11 threes. He was 2 of 18 overall. Pulled up from behind the arc. In those days, understand how rare that was. 11 times. Didn't hit any of them.
And didn't have the good sense to stop shooting at some point.
And, the New York Knicks was a very good basketball team back then. And I was nervous about that Game 7. I was glad that we had it at our home stadium. And I remember there was a shot of Hakeem and Patrick Ewing after the game, and Hakeem told Patrick Ewing, "Hey, maybe better luck next year." Those guys had history from Georgetown and U of H, Phi Slamma Jamma. We don't need to go back through that, but it was just a great time to be a native Houstonian. And big shout out to the Houston Rockets.
Hey, looking at the Phoenix Suns pre-draft. A lot of news. Obviously, we've been talking about what happens with Deandre Ayton, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But news is coming out, and again, understand how these things work leading up to the draft, rumors and things like that. But this one seems to have a little bit of substance to it for a lot of different reasons. But the one that really took me by surprise was that maybe Cam Johnson is available for the right deal. And the interesting side note there is he's still on his rookie contract with another year to go. And Robert Sarver and the Suns staring down the barrel potentially of a pretty big luxury tax bill. And signing Cam Johnson to that extension would do nothing to help that situation. This story, though, when it came out, and again, it's rumors, and by the time this is up and available, it might be completely dead in the water. But just the fact that this is coming out, I think, is pretty remarkable to me.
Yeah, and I think it's a tough decision to have to make. Cam Johnson is one of those up and coming players. I think he's got a lot of upside left, and with everything that's gone on with this organization, they need some good news. And I think bringing back Cam Johnson, I think a guy that's you could say is a fan favorite to some degree. He may not be the most liked or the most favorite as far as players on the roster, but he's definitely one of those guys with his athleticism and his ability and his fearlessness. I think it would be a major loss to have to give him up to try to bring in a temporary fix. I just like his potential long term. and there would be some other moves that I would like to see them make before getting rid of Cam Johnson.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, it's silly season, right? Everybody's jockeying for position. Everybody's trying to figure out, draft strategies and the like. So, there may be nothing to it, but man, when that one came out, I was like, ooh, that one got my attention more so than the one that everybody's been talking about, because there has a feeling of inevitability to this Deandre Ayton situation, however it plays itself out. And there's really, four situations, right? Suns can sign him to a max deal and he can stay and he can be the man. The Suns can figure out a sign and trade, right? Somebody else give him the deal. The Suns sign him to that deal and then make a deal that brings back a like salary in return so that the balance of the contracts work out. The other thing that could happen is they could let him test the market and go get a deal, and either they match it or let him go. And then finally, they just let him play out the contract and walk. That one won't happen. But that, of course, is an option. So there's three options out there. And like I said, it just has a feeling of inevitability that something's going to happen here sooner rather than later that sends Deandre Ayton away from the Phoenix Suns.
Mike, I wouldn't have any problem with Deandre Ayton not being a member of the Phoenix Suns anymore. We look at the last two seasons, when it mattered most in the playoffs, the 7-footer came up really small. And I go back to the series with the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis had his way with DeAndre Ayton. He looked frightened at times, trying to defend Giannis Antetokounmpo. And then you look at that Game 7. Mike, there were a lot of people that were to blame for that Game 7 loss to the Dallas Mavericks this year. But I can't help but go back to the discrepancy, if you will, between one DeAndre Ayton and the head coach. And when I look at Monty Williams and everything that he's meant to this organization and all he's been able to accomplish, a guy that should have been two-time defending coach of the year, but he does have at least one to his credit, rightfully so. There's no way that the organization is going to side with DeAndre Ayton over Monty Williams. So if one has to go, I don't think there's any doubt who is going to be. And I don't think anybody would bat an eye if DeAndre Ayton were to leave. You're not going to give him the max deal because he's not the man here. You said that as one of the options. He's about third or fourth deep before you start talking about the man. You obviously look at Chris Paul. You obviously look at Devin Booker. I would even throw Mikal Bridges in there as far as a go-to guy before I look at DeAndre Ayton. So there's no way you give a fourth option on a team that has underachieved when it's got to the playoffs to a max deal.
ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, what do we call this, a Woj bomb? I don't know if this is because it's not exactly breaking news. But here's his quote. The Phoenix Suns are very motivated to find a sign and trade, get some assets back for him. They do not value DeAndre Ayton at a max contract. So they're thinking the same way you are, B-Train, where you got to make a move. And so unlike the Cam Johnson news that I just floated, where that's pure rumor, when you have somebody like Adrian Wojnarowski putting some meat on the bone on the DeAndre Ayton story, that to me makes it a little bit more legitimate of a story in terms of where we're headed as we look at the upcoming draft, which is, as we record this, in about 24 hours.
Mike, all you have to do is just go back and watch the games. And I can't remember any game that had DeAndre Ayton's blueprint all over it, where it was DeAndre Ayton was the reason that they won that game. So I don't understand why people would be up in arms about the Suns wanting to part ways with DeAndre Ayton. And certainly I don't understand why people would be up in arms, why they wouldn't pay him the max. He hasn't done anything to garner that. Yes, he was the number one pick, but I think a lot of people looking at that draft and what could have been, there are a lot of different scenarios that people fantasize about, thinking, man, if we'd have just got this guy instead of what we got, we might be in a totally different situation, and the Suns may be sitting with a ring on their finger already.
Man, that's so true now. When you look at, the obvious one, but even somebody like Trae Young, that is so obvious. And, look, throughout the course of this year, you tried to balance out what happened last offseason where the Suns made a business decision. They didn't give him the deal and kind of left the door open and said, hey, look, we still have time. He can still prove it. And people out there that watched him play said, look, this guy has a chance to prove it. But just as you kind of unpacked everything around what happened at the end of this season, I agree with you. There's no reason to give it. And I think, I don't know if we mentioned on the podcast, I know I retweeted it. And there was a podcast out of Detroit where they were talking about, well, did the Pistons do a sign and trade to bring Deandre Ayton to Detroit? And the guy on the podcast said, you saw how Deandre Ayton publicly disrespected the NBA Coach of the Year on national TV, totally disrespected him. What's he going to do to a guy like Dwayne Casey? Like, you give him all this money. You think all of a sudden he's going to flip a switch and say, oh, hey, Dwayne, coach, whatever you want, I'm going to be fall in line with whatever the game plan is here. Like what's he all saying? Like, when people try to tell you who they are, listen.
Yes. Believe them. When they tell you who they are, believe them. And here's the thing, Mike. What team out there's 30 teams in the NBA, if I'm not mistaken. What team out there that's competitive, trying to win a championship, is out there screaming, we're a DeAndre Ayton away from winning a world title? I don't hear anybody saying that. So when you start talking about his value around the league, I don't think it's as high as we even value him here. And we've just talked about how little value he really has when you start talking about the pecking order as far as players on this roster. He's just not that guy, Mike. He hasn't proven to be that guy, and he keeps telling us over and over and over again, we just finally got to believe it.
All right, the NBA draft coming up. B-Train, you're sitting in the chair of your favorite franchise. You got the number 1 pick overall. Who you taking?
I mean, it's hard not to go with Chet Holmgren. I mean, I know he's a thin guy, but I look at his skills. I think I look at him differently than I look at Kristaps Porzingis. I don't see them in the same light. I think, yes, they have similar builds, and I think he's going to have to put some meat on. But I look at his skill set and what he's able to do and how much of a defensive force he is. He can impact the game immediately from that standpoint and then develop the rest of his game as his career goes on. So he makes a lot of sense. There aren't a lot of 7-foot guys that can do what he does out there.
No.
I'm a big fan. I like Banchero from Duke. I think he's going to be a hell of a player. One of my personal favorites for a lot of personal reasons, Jaden Ivey out of Purdue. I am pulling for Jaden Ivey. I am very good friends with his mom, who's the head basketball coach at the University of Notre Dame women's basketball, Niele Ivey, who was once upon a time my recruit. So I have a lot of vested interest in Jaden Ivey. But I think for what he's done from when he started at Purdue to where he is now, I think any team that's able to draft him is going to get one hell of a player and a guy that's a basketball junkie that just lives and breathes basketball. He just wants to be in the gym all the time.
Chet Holmgren is a fascinating story. ESPN did one of their in-depth features on him leading up to the draft. If you get a chance to go out and read it, it's really interesting. And he's very self-aware, not aloof at all, which you sometimes would expect for somebody that's getting talked about in this situation. And the reporter said, what are a couple things that you want people to know about you? And he said, I eat and I lift weights. So he's very aware of what the concerns are when people look at Chet Holmgren and say, okay, look at this kid. Like, is he another Sean Bradley? Which is what Bruce Pearl came out and said the other day. And he's like, no, this is not who I am. But like I said, very self-aware, which I think is a good characteristic, a good trait for people to have. And I don't know. After reading the article, I'm kind of pulling for the kid. I'd like to see him get that shot. And I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Mike. The way that this pecking order is going to go, I would love to see a scenario where everybody feels like they got their guy. Kind of like if you go back to the 2003 draft with LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade and all of the different franchise-changing players and Chris Bosh. And everybody felt good about their pick. Whether you were picking 1 or you were picking 10, everybody felt good about the guy that they got, except maybe, Detroit. But, hey, I didn't want to throw that in there like that as a dish. But, it just seemed like there were enough good players to go around for everybody that had real pressing needs. And I think looking at this draft, I think there's a lot of solid players that are going to come in and fill a lot of needs for a lot of different teams around the league.
My friends up in Las Vegas send me an email every so often with odds on news and notes, and this one obviously focusing on the National Basketball Association, the upcoming draft. The overall odds for the number one pick, there's three guys. Jabari Smith is the favorite at 1-3. And then Paolo Banchero at 3-1, and then Chet Holmgren. I'm not a math guy, 15-4, but that feels like slightly less than 3-1. So right there, neck and neck with Paolo for that number one pick. So again, interesting to see where they all shake out. And I agree with you. You know, you look at each of these, you can say, all right, there's tremendous upside with each of them. But if you wanted to, you could point and say, okay, here's some issues, here's some flaws, and here's some questions I have. And just for the record, Jaden Ivey they have as the consensus number 4 pick. And sometimes with a guy, maybe that helps. Maybe you slide down a little bit, it takes a little bit of the pressure off you. You don't have all the eyes on you. You can get out and feel yourself through that first part of your professional career to figure it out. But I agree with you. I was watching Jaden Ivey in the tournament, and he's a man. He's a big physical guy, and I think his game translates really, really well to the NBA, particularly if he goes to a team that's got a little bit of something around him where he doesn't have to do it all himself. I think he could have a great upside when he's drafted come, I think it's tomorrow night, right? Thursday night.
Yeah.
As we record
the
day before.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and it's great to think that mom and son could both play professional basketball. And with all the success that Niel has had at the University of Notre Dame and what he's been able to amass at Purdue, it's a great story. And I know both would be very happy if that dream is realized very early in the draft, which I think it will be. And I know mom will be very, very proud, and so will a lot of Notre Dame alum, because they know what Jaden means to her and what Niel means to the University of Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll also keep an eye on Benedict Martham from the University of Arizona. Figure to see him drafted somewhere between 5 and 10 once they get underway from the NBA draft. So that's going to do it for the NBA talk. Covered a lot of territory, draft, the Suns, and the NBA, kind of turned into its own version of the NFL. B-Train, stories that just keep on giving here throughout the course of the season. Off season, I should say.
Yeah, and it was a sad one. I believe there was a young player that passed suddenly in the NBA as well. I forget his name, but a young guy that was, I think, played in Portland, played for a couple teams. He was a 2017 draft pick, and just unfortunate. Life took a bad turn, and unfortunately he wasn't able to recover from it. And so, man, it's just been sad, Mike. There's been a lot of heaviness around sports here lately, and I just look forward to bigger and brighter days.
Yeah, you're talking about Caleb Swanigan. He was 26
there you go.
Pick out of Purdue in 2017.
Correct.
And just what we were talking about earlier with Jalen Ferguson, he was just 25 years of age and he passed away. Tough story, tough, particularly for his family. So, all right,
absolutely.
We all know why people tune in. This has just been the lead up to what our final segment is. So we'll step aside here one more time. On the other side, we got Sean Crespin stepping in with Pump the Brakes, and then B-Train with Dad Jokes coming up on Train and Gross. You know what the over-under was for us playing this on our road trip driving up here to Wyoming, this music? What do you think the over-under was minutes between Phoenix and Laramie in the car?
0.
Yeah, you are correct. Price is Right style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Price is Right style.
Way to hold your own, Gross. Way to hold your own.
I got nothing, man. I got nothing.
Were you driving? Right. Hang on.
Anyways.
Whoa. No. We can't just go past it. Were you driving?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think B-Train agrees with me on this. The driver has the final say of the stereo.
No.
I can't believe your car does not play by those rules.
No.
He said
It
no.
does not.
And
we're going to leave that right there.
Hey,
we're going to leave it right there.
You know why this is going to be a fun pump the brakes right now? Because Grose's wife is sitting right next to him. So this is going to be...
Wow.
I got all kinds of...
That's just wrong.
Yeah,
That's just wrong.
You guys know how this works.
just wrong.
Pump the brakes. I'm going to throw out some statements from the world of sports, maybe a little pop culture. We're going to go food direction, actually, in the backside of this week's episode. You guys tell me if you're pumping the brakes on it, or if you're rolling with that particular statement. So we're going to start in the National Basketball Association. The association, Kyrie Irving's future with the Brooklyn Nets looks uncertain. A lot of headlines out there right now. Other teams starting to circle, see if those rumors are true. Now, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, as it stands today, the Los Angeles Lakers are considered the, quote, most significant threat to land Irving if he does indeed leave Brooklyn. So pump the brakes or not, there'll be a LeBron-Kyrie reunion, this time in L.A.
Pump the brakes. LeBron James threw Kyrie Irving out of Cleveland the first time after they won a championship. Why in the world would he sign up for that again, knowing he only has a few more opportunities to try to win a championship? LeBron, as great as he is, he's no spring chicken. He's getting up there in age. He knows his time is coming to an end. Why in the world would you put up with a headache that you had to get rid of when he was more valuable back then and a guy that was more consistent as a player back then than he is now?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Pump the brakes on that. And the flip side, I think it's more what B-Train just said I agree with. But the other side, if you're any potential free agent, but Kyrie Irving, if you want to call this like a resurrection tour where you can go out and try to reclaim a little bit of his name, the Lakers aren't where you're going to go do that. You might play in the other team that plays in the building. You might zero in on the Clippers if you can figure that one out. But I don't know if I'm a player that needs to reclaim my name and rehabilitate my reputation. There's too much going on with the Lakers right now for me to want to be interested in that. So I think it's no on both sides.
And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Russell Westbrook just opt in to $47 million? That contract isn't going anywhere. So you're going to have two smaller point guards who are ball dominant that are going to play with LeBron James? Yeah, I don't think so.
Adrian Wojnarowski also points out that, and I don't pretend to be a expert when it comes to the salary cap in the NBA, but Wojnarowski says it would take roughly a $30 million pay cut by Irving in order to make it happen. So it'd be something he'd have to really be on board for, and I can't see that happening either. Number two, you guys mentioned Gronkowski earlier in the program. Gronk calling it quits for the second time in his career. Now, listen carefully to how I word this. Okay, and tell me if you're pumping the brakes or not. Rob Gronkowski is the most dominant tight end of all time at 6'6", 270 pounds. The ability to run the way he did, the most dominant tight end of all time.
I'm going to pump the brakes. I look at a Tony Gonzalez, and Tony wasn't the toughest tight end or the toughest run blocker you'll ever meet, but he was a willing trier. He was a willing participant. He would put his face in there, and of course they had Dunn back in the day, who was kind of the big brother who always kind of shielded Tony from any of the hard duties as far as being on the line of scrimmage. But the overall game of Tony Gonzalez and what he was able to accomplish, I mean, my gosh. I mean, Shannon Sharp, another guy that was willing to do it. He wasn't the biggest in the world, but Gronk is definitely one of the biggest and most productive, no doubt about it. But when I think of Tony Gonzalez and what he accomplished over, I think, 18 years? No. I got to give the nod to Tony.
Grose?
Yeah, I'm pumping the brakes as well. And it's hard on a day like today or yesterday when he announces retirement. They're playing all the highlights, and you see all the things that Gronk did.
Recency bias.
But Exactly. I was going Tony Gonzalez, but I also was thinking about, guys that are currently playing, stay in Kansas City, Travis Kelce. There's something to be said for staying on the field, which Travis Kelce is able to do. And a guy we talked about, I think, last week in George Kittle. Don't take it. Gronk's definitely top 5, but I look at this like when you were kids, if you got these guys against the wall and you're playing pickup, and you can pick one of these guys. Is Gronk the first guy you're picking off the wall when it comes to that? I don't know that he is. Definitely top 5.
If I'm looking at one game, it's 6'6", 270. The way he runs up the seam. He with the ball in his hands, what he could do. And trust me, Tony Gonzalez, man, I watched him dunk the ball over the crossbar one too many times as a Raiders fan when he was with Kansas City in those days. I no disrespect to that man, but most career touchdowns in the postseason by a tight end, Rob Gronkowski with 15. As a matter of fact, that is the second most receiving touchdowns of a player in history, behind just Jerry Rice in the postseason. He's also
22.
He's also got the most touchdowns in a season by a tight end with 18. He's got the most 100-yard games by a tight end in NFL history with 32. So yeah, no disrespect to any of those guys. If you're doing your line them up in the playground, Grose, it's hard not to look at Gronk and say, yeah, that's my guy.
Especially if I have Tom Brady as my quarterback.
Yeah. If we're in the playground, don't want me. You ain't got me as your quarterback. You're good.
There you go.
Number 3. And this one, I do allow from time to time a submission from one of the hosts here on the program, or you, if you'd love to hit us up at Train and Grose on Twitter as well. We'll take some submissions for Pump the Brakes or not. But I got to find the story, Grose, on how you came across this particular tweet, because Mike Grose sends me a text earlier today, B-Train, of a tweet from December 10th of 2019. And it's from some obscure host, a co-host of Vegas Hockey Hotline on KSHP 1400 AM. So, Grose, first and foremost, how did you come across Steve Karp's tweet? And second of all, why do you keep poking the bear with this original 6 stuff in the NHL?
Always digging deep for material, my friend, always. And I always poke the bear with the original 6 in the National Hockey League because I know how much you hate it. And I knew I could do it today because I'm 3 states away. You can't threaten to punch me in the throat
here's where
today.
we're going. I'm going to give you Steve Karp's tweet first and foremost. He says, quote, if the NHL was smart, which it's not, it would have an annual original 6 day where only those teams would play. Rangers, Bruins, Leafs, Habs, Hawks, Wings. That's it. Everyone else gets a day off. All games on national TV in U.S. and Canada. A history lesson for this generation. Pump the brakes or not, the original 6 is no longer a big deal, and hockey elitists need to just let it go.
I can't pump the brakes on that. I think the recent history, you've seen Tampa Bay with the last 2. You've seen the Chicago Blackhawks. They've been able to do their thing. So the LA Kings had a nice little run there for a little while. Anaheim. There's so many teams that have compelling.
Yeah, as you say, does it move the needle at all? Like, say they were able to do something like this where, hey, we're going to have original 6 day. It's not going to make me tune in anymore.
For the record, Sean Crespin, I can't remember how you phrased the question, but I am in disagreement with Mr. Karp on this one. So I guess I just send it to you to be me. I just like to do that to get effect from you. I think it's a horrible idea. And look, some of the responses that he got, and it was posted somewhere on Facebook where I picked it up and I went back and saw the original tweet. Somebody wrote, well, yeah, why don't you play all the games on black and white TV so we can feel like it was 1967 all over again? So, whether or not it's a good idea or not, I don't know. But the NHL is much bigger than the original 6. And so, no, I think it's a horrible idea. Yeah. Like I said, just try to get a rise out of you. But I think sometimes you get the same thing that you get baseball, these baseball purists.
Right.
And this is the same thing. Ironic that he's based out of Las Vegas, of course, where they're one of the most recent additions to the National Hockey League. But these people that always go back to the purists, I remember when, back in the 60s, my sport was better than it is now. I don't buy that for a minute.
Yeah. Okay, the last 2 are somewhat rapid fire, so we can get to B-Train's dad joke. I don't see the spectacles on on B-Train yet, but I'm assuming he's good to go with the dad joke. There they and on they go if you're just listening to this program this week. So I'm going to give you 2 food items that are making their debut this summer. And I want you to tell me just flat out if you're pumping the brakes on that or if it's something you're willing to try. All right? Just something you're willing to try. The first one, pump the brakes or not, Krispy Kreme is now selling donut-flavored ice cream at select stores around the country. Pump the brakes or not, B-Train.
Pump the brakes.
What?
Look, I'm a traditionalist when it comes to ice cream. Don't start messing with my ice cream. Just give me my cookies and cream. Give me my chocolate chip cookie dough. Give me my chocolate, and let me be. I'm not a big guy that likes a lot of different flavors with my ice cream. Just give me what I've always loved, and I'll be just fine.
Gross.
Man, I need an insulin injection just hearing about it, man. Like Krispy Kreme ice cream, I'm going to take a hard pass on that as well.
Really?
Pump the brakes, Sean Crespin.
All right, so it's called the, quote, original glazed soft serve. It's supposed to taste like their glazed donuts. You can get it in a cone or a dish. It's available at a few locations. 6 states right now: North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, and Texas. They're expanding it to more stores later this summer. And I'm pretty sure I know what I'm going to get on this one, but I just think it's funny that people still continue to make these garbage. Pump the brakes or not on a ketchup popsicle.
Oh.
No.
This is a real deal. It's a real deal. And I'll give you one guess which country this is coming from. I'll tell you one guess. Take one guess at which country this is coming from. Canada.
Where?
Canada.
Of course.
Yeah, it says, let's see, hey Canada friends, your favorite condiment just got a whole lot cooler. A refreshingly savory and sweet ketchup popsicle made from 100% Canadian tomatoes. Nah, I'm good on that, man. I'm going to pass on that. I'm going to pass on that. But you wouldn't even give it a shot? Somebody said, hey, here's something new. Not even going to give it a shot?
No.
Huh?
Get out, you hoser.
Okay. All right, that's it.
Get it out of here.
Quick one today there for Pump the Brakes. Time for B-Train's dad joke of the week. So you guys know how this works. He's going to give us his dad joke of the week, no matter what. He's getting one of these. Now, if it lands, if it works, you're going to get some of the laughter. If it is above and beyond, you get the standing O. However, there's always that chance where it just does not land, and you get one of those. Get one of those. That is the official grading system. So, B-Train, the stage is yours, my friend.
All right, here we go, fellas. What's the difference between beer nuts and deer nuts? Beer nuts are 49 cents. Deer nuts are just under $1.
I'm going standing O on that. If we go by the rules of one you're going to tell your friends, I will be telling the friends. Yeah. Let them hear it. Yeah. That was solid. That was one of the best ones we've had in quite some time. That was solid.
I do what I can, fellas. I do what I can. I do what I can.
Let's end it on a high note. That's going to do it for this edition of Trading Gross. Don't forget,
just under $1. Gross, Twitter, you get it? It's because deer.
Yeah,
you get it?
I got it. Just under $1.
That's funny.
Just under $1.
That's funny.
If I have to explain it to you, as I was saying. For more material like that, follow us on Twitter at Trading Gross and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get them. We'll see you next time for Trading Gross.
Well, holla.